Recitals, rock and roll and rope skipping replaced the traditional 3 hours at Glen Innes Town Hall this morning as hundreds of students from the region's schools celebrated the Share the Spirit theme of Education Week with a variety concert. An audience of several hundred teachers and parents were treated to a feast of entertainment as young performers demonstrated their talents in everything from drama to dance and from cat and mouse to the catwalk. The week was officially launched by Acting Director General of Education, Dennis Ralph. And what better way to wind up a concert than a big finish on a patriotic note?
The Knight's trademark solid defence crumbled against Norths last Sunday. So too did David Smith's self-control, his elbow connecting with Wilson's jaw. Last night the judiciary outed Smith for 4 weeks, bringing to an early end his crusade. He got no sympathy from Coach Finch.
It really wasn't called for, it was indefensible, and it's just another bit of bad luck for the second grade side, but we'll cast that aside and look forward to Balmain at the weekend.
Finch has his share of player problems. Chapman and Fulmer are still out with knee injuries. It'll be a patched-up Newcastle which takes on Balmain in Sunday's preliminary final. The Knights have 4 more training runs. Tackling is top priority.
We've set a record throughout the year of being the best defensive side of any grade in the Winfield Cup, and that area let us down at the weekend, and we'll address those problems this week.
Finch himself has twice tasted grand final success with St George in 77 and 79, but he says there were no mixed emotions as he watched the Saints and the Knights go round last Saturday.
None whatsoever, actually. No, my allegiance lies with Newcastle, but now that they've put us out, obviously I'd like to see them go well.
It was eyes skyward for the students and staff of King Street Public School today to launch the publication of their newspaper and share the spirit of Education Week. 550 balloons sporting school colours were released, each one carrying a message from an individual student. For the past 9 months, students and community members have been working on the second edition of their school paper. It was printed in Maitland last week and features 1 or 2 pages dedicated to works from each class. And in Maitland, students have been just as busy with an inventing competition. Students were asked to think of a problem and solve it. Among the 3 winners, this cat flea brush that releases the powder while you groom your pet, and a Be Bad board game which punishes players for being good, rewarding them with advancement around the board for acts like pinching your friend's chocolates or putting salt, not sugar, in Dad's coffee.
The Be Bad game was very clever, and I hope all the kids that may play that game in future, and I hope there will be some because it's worth producing, will be bad on the board and be good at home.
This cooling system for yabbies also took honours. As part of the school's rural studies program, endangered fish like giant scaly crayfish are bred. Fish were dying because water temperatures didn't match their native mountain streams. So 3 students invented this cooling system, which feeds water through a fridge and into the tank. So far, the fish are faring well. It's a busker's brief to travel the globe, putting smiles on the faces of those who stop and watch. At the moment, Australian and overseas buskers are in Maitland at the invitation of local business houses for the inaugural week-long Buskers Festival. With the busking season in the Northern Hemisphere all but finished, they're priming their acts for Aussie audiences. The festival serving as a workshop for the exchange of ideas. Festival coordinator Steve Scott claims busking is a growth industry. In these tough economic times, he says, people look for some light and inexpensive relief. But the life of a busker isn't all roses. Singing for your supper can be exhausting. And acquiring a busking permit from local councils can be tedious, but Mr Scott believes this serves a worthwhile purpose.
I think it's good to be there because it's the only way a lot of local authority have to monitor what they want the image of their streets to be like.
The buskers' stay in Maitland finishes on Thursday. They then move north in preparation for the annual Coffs Harbour Busking Festival in October. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
An earthquake had left the city in ruins last time Joan Carden performed in a benefit concert here. This time she's back to raise the roof with a program of Mozart and Schubert. The renowned soprano, no stranger to world and national stages, joins the Hunter Orchestra under the exacting baton of conductor Roland Peelman for performances tonight and Friday night. The orchestra takes its music stance to Muswellbrook tomorrow night for a performance with soloist Jennifer Barnes. Tonight's program includes a world premiere tribute to Mozart titled Calling Music.
As a technical officer with the Bureau of Meteorology at Williamtown, it is part of Mike Barnes's job to send weather details to the major cities. But for now, that information won't be getting through. Mr Barnes and other Bureau observers around the country are protesting over a move to double the rent they pay on Commonwealth homes.
We're expected to be posted to some pretty remote places, and we've always seen it as part of the deal of going to these remote places that we get a reasonable level of rent. And if that changes to what's something approaching market level, well, we just won't go to these places.
The observers will still go to work, but they won't relay information. And Mr Barnes says airline operations will feel the pinch.
Particularly for aircraft operations, it's going to be quite serious because they rely heavily, particularly on upper winds for their flight planning. And also, airfall weather reports are important to let them know what conditions are like where they're going to.
If the ban remains in place, weather details to airports such as Newcastle will start to shore up. But the airlines say that won't affect their operations and there'll be no disruptions to passengers. Matthew White, NBN News.
A packed public gallery watched three councillors battle it out for the top job. Councillor Doug Eaton and Councillor Tony Irving challenged Tony Sheridan. In a secret ballot, Councillor Irving was eliminated first. In the second ballot, Sheridan retained the presidency, recording an absolute majority. This will be Sheridan's third consecutive term as Shire President. He also served 2 terms in the mid-80s. Deputy Shire President Nan Winden stood down, opening the way for another 3-way challenge. Councillor John Millard was elected over Councillor Eaton. Councillor Cliff Russell was eliminated in the first ballot.
Funding for the expansion was announced in this week's state budget. The multi-purpose workshop will be used by welding and automotive students. Existing workshops will be relocated from the centre of the college. The new facility will be built in a less intrusive area within the grounds.
It will release up this workshop so that we can convert it into classrooms and teachers' offices, which are a problem for this college.
The vacated area will be refurbished and used to expand the college library and classroom accommodation. Planning is expected to start in the near future, and it's hoped the construction contract will be let in March or April next year.
It means that we will have a welding workshop which will be 3 times the present size, which means that students will be able to work with a lot more comfort and the facilities will be much better laid out.
With Australia's nuclear waste legacy growing by 60 cubic metres every year, the government's anxious to find somewhere more suitable to store it than at Lucas Heights in suburban Sydney. Several sites are in mind. The criteria are low rainfall and population, access to rail transport and well away from water storage. And this is where Gurley comes in. 30 kilometres south of Moree, the area has only just won the battle against a high-temperature incinerator.
I believe the people of the community of the rural New South Wales have now learnt they can beat the government, and they will go even further this time.
Adding to their concern is the fear that if a storage facility were established, nuclear waste could be imported, adding to the danger.
If we're going to transport this waste from overseas along our rail routes through rural New South Wales, we then have the problem of contaminating our food stocks.
The Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organisation, which is charged with finding a storage site, is exempt from environmental and planning laws, a point which has prompted a quick response by locals.
I've had numerous phone calls in the last 2 or 3 hours from the committee. They're still there. They're most disturbed by these developments, and they've told me to tell the people and the government we're still there, and we will fight this one as well.
Meet Peter Hunter, judged Apprentice of the Year out of 21 finalists from Tamworth, the Hunter and North Coast. Prospective employers were surprised when Peter showed up for the usually male-dominated electrical trade apprentices interviews. But Peter landed a job with Muswellbrook Refrigeration the Monday after completing her HSC. That was 4 years ago.
In general, I've found that people are most surprised to see a female electrician, especially when I go to their house to fix something. They sort of go, "Oh, you're here to fix my washing machine, are you? Well, that's great to see a girl."
I suppose being a trades apprentice, you've had that all the way through your career just about.
Yes, I have. At first, actually, there was a lot of people that said I'd never make it, but I have, so I'm really pleased.
No domestic appliance proves too challenging for Peter. She's just as much at home repairing a lightning-damaged switchboard or rewiring a licensed club. Peter intends to marry next year and also hopes to study business management and electrical engineering.
I've got to ask, do you always wear the high heels with your overalls?
No, I don't. I normally wear proper safety boots.
Good on you.
Folk dancing and sausage sizzles in the quadrangle, that's how many remember school open days. But wait, there's sushi, a Stegosaurus and social studies projects that you can wear. Needlework and textile classes now apply computer programs to their designs. Computer classes are busy turning out business spreadsheets. Days are divided around exercise and practising entrepreneurial skills. Some turned pulp to paper, others dabbled in drama or debating. Cultures mingled in didgeridoo classes. Aboriginal music also accompanied ceremonies in Muswellbrook today. The Muswellbrook South Public School prides itself on its differences and the ability of various groups to get along. The school welcomed an Aboriginal spirit into its midst, the great ancestral being of the Wonnarua tribe, Baiawa. Depicted as a mural on the school wall, was dedicated by the tribe's oldest surviving member, June Miller. At 82, she's lived a lifetime struggling for equality, liberty and justice, and welcomes the promotion of Aboriginal culture in school.
For years, this stretch of the harbour near the Cowper Street Bridge has been home to the city's fishing fleet. But as of tomorrow, moves will be underway to transform this barren piece of foreshore into one of the jewels of Newcastle's harbour character.
A marina berth capable of holding up to 180 vessels.
Advertisements in local and national newspapers will be calling for expressions of interest for developing the marina and associated facilities, including service outlets and storage areas, boardwalks and parks, restaurants and a yacht club. Expressions of interest will also be called for developing medium-density housing at Carrington and the reuse of railway heritage buildings along Wharf Road. Despite the tight economic times, David Lamarchant from the Honeysuckle Development Corporation is confident the project will be attractive to investors.
I think they'll come from probably all over Australia and perhaps overseas.
For the Development Corporation, the exciting element of issuing a call to investors is that after years of planning and controversy, Honeysuckle is finally approaching bricks and mortar.
There's been a lot of work done up till now in preparation with site works and so on, but now I think we can confidently say that we'll be able to see something physically done within the coming months.
Tenders for the work are expected to be let early next year, and the harbourside transformation will begin soon after. Scott Bevan, NBN News. Peter Reith may have appreciated the free lunch, and the crowd of business people at the Newcastle Chamber of Commerce's Enterprise Awards presentation may have appreciated his fiscal funnies.
I heard one the other day. The definition of an economist is somebody who sees something working in practice and wonders whether it will work in theory.
But through sheer force of repetition in his speech, the Shadow Treasurer made it clear what really brought him to Newcastle.
Fight back, fight back. Thank you.
With a federal election perhaps less than 6 months away, Peter Reith was giving the Coalition's taxation reform package the hard sell, holding up the national debt and the unemployment statistics as reasons why Australia needs a change. Mr Reith appealed to his audience by saying the goods and services tax is not a dirty phrase, but a bottom line blessing for business.
We have got to have a tax system that actually advantages Australian businesses against their competitors, so that we tilt the playing field in our favour.
What Mr Reith didn't mention once in his speech was the Hunter or regional New South Wales, or how Fight Back would specifically benefit these areas. That wasn't answered until the Shadow Treasurer toured the Port Waratah Coal Services facilities later in the afternoon. Mr Reith claims that the ALP has abandoned its strongholds like the Hunter over the past decade. He says with the Fight Back package, the Coalition will put back the heart and jobs in regions like these by not only bolstering the traditional industries, but fostering new ones as well.
We are very pro-manufacturing, pro the export industries, and we have a package that's very good for them. But we want to encourage both not only the big business but small business, and we have a package to do that.
Scott Bevan, NBN News.
Tomorrow at the MCG, Footscray and Geelong do battle for the chance to meet the West Coast Eagles in this year's AFL Grand Final. The Bulldogs haven't won a flag since their victory over Melbourne way back in 1954, but showed great purpose in the semi-final victory over St Kilda last weekend. There have also been some lean times for the Cats. Despite a consistently high profile in the competition, their last trophy came 29 years ago. Geelong will need to lift its all-round performance after being belted by the Eagles last week. Footscray will be desperate to shut down the Geelong attack to stay in the fight for the flag. Today, 2 runs within the one. A 5-kilometre sprint for those who really wanted to get the heart muscles pumping on a Sunday morning, and the more arduous 10k jog in and around Tamworth. In all, 460 runners took off in search of glory or personal satisfaction. And it was Green who started to assert his authority early on. Already the winner of this year's King of the Mountain Classic and the Australian Secondary Schools Cross Country, Green was never in serious trouble throughout the race and stormed away to win by a massive 65 seconds, the time 32 minutes flat. In second place in a time of 33.05 was Matthew Kaluda of Manila, and only 10 seconds behind Kaluda was Gunnedah athlete Glenn Edmonds. Helena Cullinan raced superbly to dominate the women's section of the fun run, and her winning time was 40 minutes, 0.07 seconds. Royal Dolphin got the nod from Gill's Magic and Oceanic Queen, the time 1:11.75. The feature was the Gunnedah Open Handicap over 1,000 metres. Resound Lady from Prudhoe Bay and Coppermite, the time a smart 58.7.
The Minister was addressing a meeting of country health workers at the Pelican Beach Resort in Coffs Harbour. He says administrators and service providers should be more customer focused. They should also concentrate on preventative health as well as hospital care.
This forum really is about healthcare services. How do we do a better job in the community, in informing the community of what modern health is all about?
Ron Phillips signalled the introduction of a number of initiatives, including the establishment of a Country Health Week and a Healthy Towns Award, which would seek out the town with the best preventative healthcare system. Meanwhile, a New South Wales Health Department paediatrician, Dr Andrew Gardner, told the conference that Australia immunises a smaller proportion of its children against diseases such as tetanus and polio than many third world countries.
Last-minute training for 18-year-old Elizabeth Heslop certainly paid off at the World Trampolining Sports Championships in New Zealand this month. Elizabeth, who belongs to the Waratah Gymnastics Club, won the 18 and over World Tumbling title. But the highlight of the championships for Elizabeth was her performance in the open section. Her goal was to make it to the finals, which consists of the competition's 10 best. Elizabeth did this, finishing in 7th place, which is the best result ever by an Australian in the tumbling section. As a result, she's been invited to represent Australia in the World Games in Holland in July next year.
The decision was taken at a special meeting today, called because state government funding has dried up and several of the 8 member councils have decided to cease financing the group and run their own tourism races. The authority was formed in 1985 when the Wran government offered $1 million in funds over 5 years for the promotion of tourism in the New England region. But not all of that promised $1 million was passed on by the State Tourism Commission.
The chairman of the commission admitted that they'd spent $100,000 that was originally allocated to this authority. They'd spent it on other things without consulting us in any shape or form, and I'm very, very annoyed with the commission.
Authority Chairman Jeff Watson of Jumericshire fears the promotion of tourism in New England will now suffer, going back to the fragmented parochial days of the past.
They have to forget about and make certain that parochialism doesn't come back into it. as it was in the past. I believe that they do have some very, very capable tourist officers, and if they all work together, that they will achieve a lot of things for New England.
Councillor Watson's last official function as chairman was to launch the authority's latest venture, $20,000 worth of brochures covering the entire region. From November, the organisation will become a management body run by volunteer committees.
The Minister's first stop was an informal gathering at Roach Racket Resort of tourism operators from Port Stephens. He applauded the region's infrastructure and the continuing capital works expenditure catering for tourism growth. Mr Griffith says regions like Port Stephens and the Hunter stand to gain a substantial slice of a tourism market, which he predicts will exceed all previous forecasts.
This industry is now earning 10% of Australia's foreign exchange. It has the biggest growth potential of all industries in terms of employment.
The federal government has allocated record expenditure to promote Australia internationally. Mr Griffith says local tourism promoters who take the initiative can expect to reap the benefits. Mr Griffith says the tourism industry should not only prepare for a threefold increase in visitors, but should also expect them to be from a much more diverse cultural background.
We're now putting resources into places like South Korea, Taiwan as two examples. We've seen massive growth out of those two countries.
Promotion campaigns are also being carried out in Indonesia, but Mr Griffith said most of our visitors will continue to come from traditional areas in Europe, America and Japan. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
Alderman and Council Town, USA, Canada, Russia and New Zealand. Australian National Award going over there to their celebrations in November to do that. But also it was, I think, to get the other crews as drunk as they could the night before, so they couldn't sail too well.
Recognition of something that's been going on for a long while. We have
exchange products will be good examples with other sister cities.
On most Fridays, these men could be found deep in the earth, mining the rich coal seam under Pelton Colliery near Cessnock. But today, they had no work to go to. The last underground shift at Pelton returned to the surface yesterday. For the first time since 1916, the entrance to the pit lay silent, while the men from the final shift got together with a generation of miners past to hold a wake at a nearby bowling club.
"76 years, a lot of good men that have been retired and died a long time work there, a lot of men I've respected."
Once the workplace of hundreds of men, only about 16 underground miners remained at Pelton. Most will move on to other operations of the Newcastle Wallsend Coal Company. Some fear their future is uncertain.
Well, I don't know at present, under the situation that the industry's in.
In its heyday, the coalfields boasted 28 mines, employing 11,000 people. Now, with Pelton gone, there's only one operation left at Ellalong, which means over the years not only thousands of jobs have gone, but also part of the very character of this area.
It'll always be known as the coalfields, but once this mine and Ellalong shut, it'll be only a story in the back of generations to come behind it.
Mine management don't want to comment on the closure yet, except to say it was brought on by the depletion of coal reserves. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
The official opening of the museum complex was conducted by member for Tamworth, Tony Windsor. Reg Wellborn from Uralla is a third-generation blacksmith. He showed how farriers of old made horseshoes. As well, there was a display of antiques.
Fast down the outside, it's Modendale in front, Cox's Creek is flying! Cox's Creek raced up and hit the front, a treble to the lady. Cox's Creek first.
Cox's Creek from Modendale and name day. The time 1:22.7. At Tamworth last night, the ladies' auxiliary pace provided a super finish. Moville Mercy from Calvary and Broken Nugget, the time 2:35.2. Four to 1, 7 to 4 in favourite and 11 to 4.
The state-of-the-art XPT was due at Byron Bay just after 10 p.m. 2 hours later, it crawled into the station on its last legs. The train had broken down near Mullumbimby, just 15 minutes up the line in a railway black hole. Its position, situation and fate unknown. The official explanation, engine failure, because of a mechanical problem. A new engine was called for, but some of the 250 passengers got impatient and tried to hitch instead. The train finally left at 4:20, more than 6 hours behind schedule. Despite their enforced stay on a freezing station platform, some travellers were philosophical. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
It's believed the vandals struck late yesterday, going on a costly rampage through the grounds and classrooms of Jesmond High School. This is what school officials were confronted with when they arrived. More than a dozen classrooms ransacked, tables overturned, paint splashed across walls and windows broken. Officials say the mess will cost thousands of dollars to clean up. The extent of the damage was revealed when the school was opened up. The vandals made sure they left their mark on almost every section of the high school, raiding offices, classrooms, storerooms and the canteen. Today, scientific police joined officials from the Education Department checking the damage. Detective Craig Ray says it's not the first time the school has been hit.
Yeah, apparently we've been told they've had some similar instances of this in recent times, yes.
Also targeted was the adjoining Heaton Primary School, where the vandals splashed paint and damaged a number of rooms, including the newly opened Reading Recovery Room. Police are continuing their inquiries. Matthew White, NBN News.
Everything Georgina Gooch and her two sons own was taken out of their Stockton home and dumped on the street.
10 o'clock this morning they were here and just said I had to be out of the house by 10 o'clock and wasn't allowed to walk back in. Long enough to get my son's medication and clothes for us to put on. And that was it.
Georgina is unemployed and on a supporting parent's pension. She's lived in this Department of Housing home for the last 9.5 years. She says she was only $60 behind in the rent when she was thrown out. It doesn't sound
a lot.
like...
I know. That's all it's owing now, $60. That's all.
And how much was owing?
Well, they said 244, but it would have only been by the reckoning of the book 100.
Late this afternoon, it started to rain. Friends helped Georgina cover her possessions with plastic sheets and carpet. What are you going to do now?
I don't know. Nothing I can do.
Deputy Regional Manager of the Department of Housing, Jim Hoysted, says the action was taken after a hearing by the Residential Tenancies Tribunal. While he wouldn't comment in detail on the case, he did say Georgina Gooch's tenancy with the Department of Housing has been very difficult. Jane Anderson, NBN News.